Hello, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and I want to thank all of our keynote speakers, expert moderators, panelists, and solutions sponsors for participating in this year's Insight Jam Live. This has been a big year with the launch of the InsightJam.com community site and the amazing growth of the Insight Jam YouTube channel, which now has over 500,000 subscribers. Much of this success is tied directly to the video events, podcasts, and panel discussions we have been producing, and none of that would be possible without the thoughtful participation of the many IT professionals who are generously sharing their expert insights for this latest jam. We are building Insight Jam to be a place to celebrate enterprise technology with best practices, expert analysis, and solution showcases. And we want all of you to join us there to keep the jam going into the new year and beyond. If you haven't joined Insight Jam, please do. And if you already have, take a moment to invite some of your colleagues. And again, thank you all for being here and enjoy this event.
Solutions Review presents Insight Jam, a social media community for enterprise technology. Hi, I'm Jonathan Paulo. Welcome to day 2 of Insight Jam Live, Strategies for AI Impact, 4 days of thought leadership. Throughout this week, we're bringing you expert keynotes and panel discussions. We have another great one lined up for you right now in the 10 o'clock hour. What will next-gen ERP implementations look like? We've assembled Sam, Dan, Marcus, Scott, and Kyler from around the globe to discuss. We bring them in now. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you so very much for being here. I am excited for this conversation and excited you are here to have it with each other. I'll just be watching. But before we get going, let's start with some introductions. Sam Gupta, you've agreed to moderate. So let's start with you. 30 seconds or less. Tell the audience a bit about yourself and maybe your background with ERP.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for the show. I'm with Elevate IQ. Elevate IQ is the independent digital transformation consulting firm. We help our clients with any sort of enterprise technology selection, digital transformation strategy, etc. About me, I have been in this space for roughly 20 years, doing very similar things related to ERP implementation, digital transformation implementation. Super excited to be part of the show.
And thank you for being here. Daniel, over to you next.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to this session. And my name is Daniel Mateo. I'm based in Barcelona, in Spain. And I'm SAP project manager with close to 20 years of experience in international projects, focused only in the SAP environment and also in mainly finance and logistics area. So I'm really glad to join that.
Excellent. Glad to have you here. Thank you. Kyler, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Kyler Cheatham. I'm the Chief Performance Officer at The Confluential. We specialize in speed to value enterprise integrations or getting value from your existing technology. And I'm very happy to be here and honored to be part of this conversation and talk about what's next on the ERP frontier.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Marcus, over to you.
Oh, good morning. Good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm an attorney in the ERP software space. And I'd say for the last 20 years or so, more than 20 years, I've devoted my practice to really drafting and negotiating ERP-related contracts and then litigating ERP failures in courts across the country. I've worked in-house at SAP, and I've also worked in-house at Infor, and so I hope that provides me with a unique insight, to provide the listeners and viewers here today with respect to ERP projects, what's next, and what we can do to mitigate issues and failures associated with these projects.
Awesome. Appreciate your perspective, and thanks for coming today. Scott Hayes, last but not least.
Hey everyone, Scott Hayes from Rimini Street. We are a global leader in end-to-end enterprise software support and services. We're independent, vendor agnostic, and we provide those services for Oracle, SAP, and many other enterprise software solutions. I've been in the space for about 20 plus years and 5 years with Rimini Street, focusing on the alternatives that we provide to practitioners in those areas.
Excellent. Looking forward to the discussion. So I'm going to step out of the way and let Sam get to it, and I'll be back at the end of the show to wrap things up. But good luck, all.
All right, guys. So let's start with the next generation ERP implementation. I guess that's the topic that we are talking today. I personally am stuck on the previous generation ERP implementation because I don't think there's much that has been changed. But obviously, we are going to talk from your perspective in terms of what you are seeing. Do you guys see any sort of technologies that are going to be relevant from the new generation implementation perspective? So, Daniel, I am going to start with you. What are you seeing when you look at the ERP implementation, let's say in 2024? Are you seeing any sort of technologies that could make a difference? So over to you, Daniel.
Sure, yes. Currently, the main customers and companies, in addition to implement the main core ERP, that is finance, logistics, and all the manufacturing, they are also adding a lot of cloud tools that improves the integration and also the engagement with third parties, customers, vendors, banks, and also the employees in order to improve their operations. So there are, in case of SAP environment, there are many cloud tools that you can use and implement to improve the ERP, mainly for travel expenses like Concur, SuccessFactors, for employee engagement, Ariba, for vendor management, Cloud CRM, for all the customer relationship, multi-bank, invoicing, and tax reporting automations that they are pretty good. And in those coming months, they are very powerful tools.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for those insights, Daniel. And I'm going to have some clarifications there if you could answer those, I guess. So one of the things, I'm going to set the context for the listeners as well. Some of the tools that you have mentioned, obviously, companies are sort of implementing them. So this topic is about ERP implementation or any sort of enterprise technology implementation. So in this case, the tools that we are talking about are going to help with the implementation process itself, not necessarily the other tools that are going to be, they are not necessarily going to help with the implementation process. They are going to be the tools for other functional areas that are probably going to augment the ERP. Am I getting this right, Daniel?
Correct, yes. Those are tools that the user will use while they are being implemented, the ERP. Yeah, correct.
Okay, perfect. So Kyler, I'm coming over to you, I guess. So one of the things, I guess, I'm going to set some more context here. When we look at the implementation, and I know Scott, he mentioned that they are independent, right? And I don't know if we have any sort of vendor representation in the room, but it's always interesting to talk, from both perspectives. So you have vendor side of the story, and you have the real customer side of the story. And these two stories kind of don't line up. From the implementation perspective. In my personal experience, the implementation is going to be much bigger effort from the customer perspective. From the vendor perspective, obviously, they are going to say that the implementation is shorter with respect to technology. So from your experience, when you are looking at these implementations, are you seeing any sort of technologies that are going to be helpful with the implementation process?
Yeah, absolutely. I love how you designated kind of tools versus approach, because those are two very different things. So when we're looking at kind of how can we make implementations easier or more streamlined for every agenda in the room, whether it's a client ownership of the project or, an SI that, needs to get the implementation done fast, or a vendor that's just trying to essentially sell their software. There's a lot of people and kind of conflicting agendas there. I think one thing that I've seen is the rise of kind of these data partners. So being able to have, whether it's you're utilizing AI or some sort of data platform that can help you go in as a business and kind of do that foundational prep work, utilizing data organization and management technologies. That way, when you go into an implementation, you're able to know kind of the foundation of where your data is at, where you want it to go, and the results that you'd like to get to that. Because a lot of times that's what can cause the messiness between that client and that vendor, is just that conflict of not really knowing what you want. So that's one tool that I think I'm really excited to see kind of going into the next generation, if you will, of ERP implementation. I'd be interested to hear, the panel's thoughts on that as well.
Okay, amazing. So I'm going to have some follow-ups for you as well there. And overall, when you look at these data platforms, are these sort of the ingredients for the architecture or the ERP structure that you are building, or are they helping more with the implementation process? Because there are going to be many flavors of data tools that are going to be available in the market. For example, let's say if you look at tools such as your Palantir, they are more of the ingredients, but when you look at tools such as Solanas, that's probably going to be a tool that is probably going to help with the implementation. So in your experience, when you're referring to the data platforms, what role do they play, and how do they affect the implementation, I guess? Helen.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So what I'm referring to is the ingredients piece of that. So utilizing a data partner or a consultant or whomever to kind of get your side of the street ready to go and clean, so that you as a client can really be empowered to know, okay, here's where we're at. This is what I need, and these are the results that I want to see. So that when you go into those vendor conversations, there isn't, that growing empire, if you will, of tools that will kind of simulate or speed up implementation when it comes to utilizing data, but you can't use those without a good foundation of your own enterprise data. So that's kind of what I'm referring to in that conversation.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your insights, Skylar. So Marcus, I'm coming over to you. In your experience, are you seeing any sort of technologies that are helping with the implementation process?
Yeah, I'm seeing a variety of things. And I have the benefit in my practice of representing both customers and vendors. And so what I am seeing from a lot of mid-size vendors really is, an analysis of how to utilize artificial intelligence in the context of actually creating customizations, modifications, integrations, or the implementation process in general, how to make that more efficient. And I think as a customer, you've got to be very concerned with this, and you want to have an understanding of is that ERP vendor or that integrator utilizing, in connection with the implementation or integration of that software, artificial intelligence tools, and what is the impact to me from a substantive perspective? I think there could be tremendous amount of risk. You're looking at code that has been used across their customer base that's being reused, that they may not have 100% rights to be incorporated into your customization or modification. So I think that's really at the forefront from a risk perspective. In my view, it's these emerging technologies, how they're going to be utilized, and what that does to the risk profile of the implementation or integration, and how you mitigate that risk going forward.
Yeah, so very interesting points there. So one follow-up question for you as well, Marcus. So overall, when you look at these technologies, and obviously the vendor's side of the story is going to be slightly different from the implementation perspective. And sometimes there are going to be disconnects, and probably that's a role that you are playing to manage the expectation from both sides when you are structuring these contracts. You want to make sure that customers are not going to have any sort of red flags, surprises. They are always going to be there, the kind of projects these are. So when you look at this disconnect between the vendor as well as customer, what are you seeing in your experience?
Well, I'm seeing really a lack of transparency from the vendors. You don't get any kind of disclosure from them as to what kind of tools that they're actually utilizing in the implementation or integration of your project. And so the onus is on you to really drive that forward within the structure of that contract or that contract negotiation. I mean, it's somewhat similar to, are they using open source? And if they are, what's the nature of their use of that open source? You want to do the same for artificial intelligence. I mean, if the backbone of the code that they're integrating, modifying, customizing, they're including in your product is all generated via artificial intelligence, you need to know that, and you need to put the proper risk mitigation tools in place in case there's some sort of an issue associated with that. We can get into that later, but you really have to really force them to be transparent, because I don't think they're going to, and they may not have an incentive to. I mean, if you've got a time and materials implementation project, and they're utilizing technology to make them more efficient, you gotta have an understanding, and you gotta hold their feet to the fire and make them accountable.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your insight, Marcus. So, Scott, I'm coming over to you. And overall, when you look at the implementation process, I know that you guys do a lot of work, from the support perspective. I don't know if you guys are also involved during the implementation phase, but my understanding is that you guys do a lot of work in the SAP ecosystem as well as some other ecosystems. I think you did mention that, right? So one of the things that I have not brought up so far, and hopefully in the next round, we can touch on those, right? But some of the tools that SAP brought in their portfolio, they are really helping, from the implementation perspective. I don't know if the other vendors are there in the market that are following similar strategy, but one of the category of those tools are going to be digital adoption platform, DAP. The second is going to be process mining. I think Kyler was touching on that category, I guess. So that is there. And then there is another one, I guess. So there are 3 or 4 tools that are sort of helping with the implementation process, because now you are going to have much better visibility into your enterprise architecture, the processes, the data. So I don't know if you are seeing these tools in your experience, Scott. So over to you, whatever you want to share, from the implementation.
Yeah, there's a lot there, Sam. I think that the implementation, the whole concept of implementation is really shifting in a drastic way. I mean, this isn't the first round for most companies. And so what they're seeing is that they've already implemented some software out of the box and, followed the prescribed implementation process given to them by their vendor. But now what's happening isn't so much about how do I implement this piece of software. The question that practitioners are asking is, how do I get the IT capabilities I need to run my business better? And I like what Kyler talked about in terms of understanding the business from the data level up. But there's another level here that I think really comes into play, and that is, how do I understand the business at a process level? And what is happening with implementations is using tools to understand that. You mentioned process mining. That's a great one. I've seen some amazing tools out there that take a look. They do process discovery and process mapping empirically. They literally sit alongside the company and the organization and the screens and the users and do what would have been in the 1940s and 50s, time and motion studies. Who's actually touching what, when, and how often in this long-running process, and how can I shorten that whole thing up? Number one. Number two, what parts of it can I automate? So it's not just process mining, but literally process mapping, process and person observation, and then come back around with process automation. And that may be with something that comes from your vendor like SAP, or it may come from someone outside your vendor. So you can look at processes that span, enterprise applications beyond just a single silo from a single vendor.
Yeah, so very interesting insights. And I love the way you have put it that, the implementations are sort of drastic. I guess that's the word that you had used. And I'm going to have a follow-up there on that, right? So in my personal experience, when I look at the implementation process, it's probably going to be very similar. The pain points are similar. In fact, in my personal experience, again, you guys can share your insights, whether you guys feel that, cloud is easier. I think that's the story that we are hearing from the vendors. In my personal experience, that's not true at all. The challenges are similar, in fact, more, with cloud technology. So when you say drastic, maybe touch a little bit more on that. Do you really feel that there is a real difference in the newer technologies in 2024 right now with respect to the implementation process, Scott?
I can answer that on both sides, actually. If we use the word drastic, which might not have been the best choice of words, but I do see that the value and the expanse of IT automation that we can bring to a business the scope is just enormous now. There's so many creative people out there saying, how can we do this better, faster with the support of computing power? And so that has made the whole problem set, or I'll call it the opportunity set, much, much broader. Okay, so that's probably the most drastic part of it. Here's where the good news is. It's the tooling that you talked about. It's the ability to apply technology to technology to better understand what is happening, what can happen. And the complexities are that practitioners are choosing to use the best of breed capabilities from multiple vendors or from in-house, no code, low code, whatever. And to be able to stitch those together, the technologies that are now available to integrate, to use microservices, to use observability suites to see what's going on. Those are the things that have come to the rescue and made this era of enterprise-wide integration and service to the organization possible.
Okay, great points. Thank you so much, Scott, for that. So Daniel, I'm coming over to you, and I know that we had touched a little bit on AI. So this segment is going to be about AI. I know Marcus likes to talk about AI, so that's why we had discussed in the first segment. But now, let's say if we go back, and obviously AI is bringing a lot of changes in general from the process perspective. I don't know whether you guys are excited about AI agents. The way AI agents are going to operate, they are going to be far more powerful. They are going to have a lot more data. In general, they are going to have access to, and some of them are going to be modeled as the humans and agents. So I don't know how the traceability is going to work, because one of the fundamental aspect of any sort of ERP-centric implementation is going to be the whole accountability and traceability. So I don't know if that is going to change the implementation. So in the era of AI, how the implementation are going to look like? Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So AI will be, or it's now ongoing and it's progressing quickly. And there are still a lot of to move forward, but for the time being, there are quite interesting tools that AI can be used. One is related as part of the chatbot or SAP Joule chatbot that can be easily to implement also for consulting colleagues, for business, and it's guiding all the implementation of the cloud solutions, as well as all the best practices that are using or trying to learn about how are you implementing the different processes within the business requirements. And it's also pretty interesting all the automation for testing, that it's based as well, or they are moving forward with artificial intelligence, that it's reducing the time of testing as the machine is learning based on a single test case, and they can run multiple test cases in a very short time frame. And last but not least, all the coding will be changing a lot with artificial intelligence, and now there are a lot of solutions that business can develop by themselves without knowing anything about programming, some kind of complex logic that it can run quite smooth and reducing time of development.
Yeah, so very interesting points. And I guess, I think we have an overall agreement in the room that, okay, there's going to be some sort of impact, on the testing. I think you mentioned that, Daniel, as well as overall from the data perspective. I guess, Kyler, Scott, you both agreed on that, right? So Kyler, I'm coming over to you. Overall impact of AI on the implementation process from your perspective. Kyler, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as we kind of discussed, there's going to be some impact if you're ready for that, and if you are a mature enough business to be able to understand that. So say your vendor kind of brings you an AI solution, it's always just important to have considerations and kind of those quality gates when you have those conversations to understand if that's actually relevant for your environment. And so there's, a conversation around, are you as a business ready for AI? There's no doubt it will change the way we implement technology, right? But the question is, how are you as a business going to be ready to actually reap the benefits of that? And do you understand how to do that? I think really we look at more of how it will affect the people and perception within the organization rather than the technology. Because the technology functionally, it's there. But when we're talking about changing roles, or we're not communicating within what's going to happen to roles and responsibilities, that's where we get that disruption in the implementation and kind of this rumor mill that goes on, and that fear-based robots are stealing my job. So I think that's going to have a bigger issue, if you will, of talking about what AI is in implementation. That perception of what it's going to mean for the organization needs to be effectively communicated and understood by leadership, because AI has kind of been put on this pedestal as almost this magic, in technology, when really it's just a function of data, an algorithm that spits out results, as long as you have healthy data in the algorithm, right? Whether you use it for automation, whether you use it for process intelligence, it doesn't really matter. You need to be able to understand what you're looking for as far as an outcome, and more importantly than those technical pieces, explain to your organization what we're utilizing for that, because that impact, that human impact, is where we see those failures really happen.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think great points. And the point that you are trying to make is the implementation is always going to be much bigger than just the pure implementation. And with AI, it's going to be even more. So Marcus, I'm coming over to you. The question, I know that you had mentioned a little bit about AI. I don't know if you're going to have more to add there, but we are looking for any sort of implications of AI on the implementation.
Well, I mean, I think in general, artificial intelligence can be transformative with respect to the implementation or integration of enterprise software, and I think it can make the implementation, I would think, more efficient, more streamlined, faster, and easier. I say that with some reservation because we know how hard these projects are, and the failure rate of these things. And I think, like Kyler said, I mean, you really have to have, it's what's the end result, right? That's where the rubber meets the road, and that's the measurement for success in some ways. It's, what's the business value that I'm getting out of this, not how it was integrated or implemented. And I think if you can do it more efficiently, there's a lot of value there. Again, it carries a lot of risks with respect to, privacy, ownership issues, transparency issues. And then I also think something that we haven't talked about today, which we are seeing more of, is data is a modern currency, right? And so once you've got your integration in place, your software is implemented, integrated, and what's the end result with respect to the utilization of the data that you put into that ERP system, and who's going to have access to it, and who's ultimately going to be able to utilize it, own it, and commercially exploit it. And there's this concept in SAP licensing of indirect access, and I think Scott said technology talking to technology. And here, I think you've got to be concerned, and you've got to be able to mitigate the commercial exploitation of your data in the context of you having other AI tools that want to utilize the data, your data that's in your ERP system, and is there going to be a charge for that from the vendor? And the short answer to that is probably, and you need to be able to account for that and figure out how to mitigate your financial exposure. So there's a lot of things to talk about with respect to artificial intelligence.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great points. Thank you so much, Marcus, for that. So Scott, I'm coming over to you. Any sort of impact of AI on the implementation process?
Yeah, I think there's a few things I'm going to mention here, and it's great to be able to back clean up because I can kind of comment on what everyone has mentioned. I believe there's going to be tools. So Kyler mentioned, data hygiene, data governance, and you don't want to put AI on top of data that doesn't make any sense. I think we're going to see AI tools that actually help you clean up your data, right? And that will be step one. Mark has talked a little bit about the commercial aspects of data and the value of it. That could go a number of different ways, but what we see our practitioners concerned about from a commercial perspective is the cost of AI. How do I predict what that large language model is going to cost me and all of the compute power that's going to be needed to execute some form of AI for some process that I want to do? And, I would challenge anyone to go to their CFO and say, our AI costs next year are going to be unpredictable and uncontrollable. That okay with you? I don't think you'll get a good answer there. And so we're going to have tooling that helps both predict, control, and almost put a lever on what AI is used and how much compute power and cost it consumes. The third and final point I'd make is that, because we're talking about the vendors here, they will be very, very good at delivering AI within their scope. But at Rimini Street, we see AI as an enterprise-wide endeavor and something that needs not to be bounded by a single vendor's purview or applications or data. So we're encouraging our clients to explore and exploit AI solutions that are outside of a single vendor and actually make the entire business run better.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Scott, for that. So the next segment that I'm going to open up it's going to be twofold, right? And they sort of go hand in hand. So number one is going to be the contract. And I know Marcus has spoken a lot about the contracts. So let's touch a little bit more from everyone's perspective in terms of the contracts and what companies should be looking at when they are looking at the implementation. But the second point is, how can we make the implementation faster? And obviously the vendor side of the story always is going to be that with new technologies, the implementations are faster, but are they really going to be faster? In fact, if you look at Kyler's point, that she was talking about that the implementation is going to be very different. The version of implementation that the customers are expecting is probably going to be very different. So how do you sort of account for that? So number one, contract, and number two is going to be ways of making implementation faster. Daniel, over to you.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So for the contracts, ideally, it should be now moving to a different, after the implementation, it will be different licensing, since most of the cloud solutions are based on the use of it and also number of interactions instead of number of users that they will run. So as part of the licensing for the contract, they should take into consideration to have the cost expected after the implementation. Also, during the contract, they need to be aware that business should be more involved rather than development. So the cost can be reduced for development team, but business and also the customer should be more participating into those projects. So all the cloud solutions that SAP is providing, they have best practices that they are more guiding the solution that will be implemented with more quicker, but it implies to have more interactions, and business needs to go to perform some configuration into the system, understanding what are the main pain points related to data migration and some data cleansing, but is more or business. It should be the key to this process. And also, in order to make it more smooth, it's always following what is the best practices and try to fit to a standard much as possible. So it will be, you can do a cloud implementation in 2 months, and they are quite confident, the users, to run.
Great points, Daniel. Thank you so much. Kyler, over to you. Any ways of making the implementation faster, and your version on the contract, I guess, as far as the ERP implementation goes?
Yeah. I'll just touch on the contract because really that's Marcus's world and you should listen to what he says. The one thing I'll say to you is you have never seen a contract like this before. I don't care if you have the best counsel in the entire universe, spend the money, invest the time, and get someone to look at that for you, because being locked into that can completely take down your system. For example, especially if you're a bigger global organization that has these complex systems and you have specific integrations, like we've been talking about these new environments that are microservice based, that are more focused on customization. I mean, tell me an SAP client that doesn't have a customization. It just doesn't exist, right? You need to make sure that you understand the ownership around that, because it can be very sneaky, whether it's with your vendor or SI, and you might have a customization that you quite literally don't own. So you either are locked in with that vendor for the rest of eternity, or you have to redo the customization that takes down a pivotal part of your business. So that's all I'll say on the contracting is absolutely invest in an expert to help you go through that, because there is wording in there, especially when you're moving to a SaaS environment. We have a subscription right now that we don't understand the licensing tiers. We don't understand these hidden costs that Marcus mentioned about, what happens with our data. It's just too complex for you to not invest time for someone to go through that. And then on the faster side, it's kind of an interesting question with my kind of specialty in the marketplace, which is more front-end business processes and integrations. We have a lot, specifically of my client community, talking about how fast can we do this and bringing that message to the marketing and the marketplace. And that's really the wrong question as the client that you should be asking. You could do it in 5 days for sure. It would be terrible, right? But that you could absolutely do it functionally. Yes, it's there. But what is the quality that you're really looking for? And I think this is going to be the main focus, because I love this question of how fast not only can I get my data migrated, but also how fast can I implement this entire system? And that's where we go into that approach that we talked about earlier, tools versus a new approach of ERP or enterprise implementations. Are you going to do it business unit by business unit, get kind of that proof of concept, and then scale across the organization so you can get that realized revenue, in the next couple months? Or are you going to do a huge monolithic waterfall implementation that you're going to kind of commit to that 5-year IT modernization? That's going to be kind of what we see now. And since everything, time is money, there's a movement towards faster is better. And sometimes maybe it is. I think the thesis of that point is you have to understand what you're actually looking for out of your implementation and what those outputs mean to you as far as a business. What are those KPIs? Am I trying to find more cost efficiencies through my process intelligence? What am I trying to achieve? If you, the executive team, don't understand that, then you could go as fast as you want, but you're still not going to get the results or realize those results, have that benefit realization at the end of your project.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great points. So Marcus, coming over to you, I know that you can probably talk about this topic the whole day. So this is going to be contract as well as ways of making implementation faster.
Yeah, well, I think Kyler said it right. I mean, look, faster is better, sure, but what's better than faster is better, right? I mean, just because it's faster doesn't mean it's better. And I think, the risk associated with the push to the cloud, and then using, a shiny new object like artificial intelligence as a justification for a quick and painless implementation, I think, is an issue. It's problematic. And, it's going to be coupled with, don't worry about it. It's cloud software. It's the same across our customer base. It's easier to implement, and we're using AI. I mean, talk about setting up unreasonable expectations. I'm reminded of an old story where, we were talking about a fraud case with a software vendor I was defending a long time ago, none of the ones I've mentioned here. And, the salesperson said, well, was asked, can the software do this? Well, yeah, it can. It's just a matter of modifying the software, but they don't tell you how much it's going to cost, right? And I think you've got to look at AI in a similar fashion. I mean, can it be better? Sure. But you've got to know what you're getting into. And that's where the contractual framework becomes incredibly important. And you look at this in two ways. One, you look at what kind of AI functionality or technology are they utilizing, a vendor or integrator, in the implementation or integration process to make that more streamlined. And what risks does that present? You've got to contract around that. And then you've got to make sure you've accounted for the risks associated with your utilization of an AI product. And you've got to look at the inputs and the outputs, and what that fundamentally changes really is the indemnity language in the contract, the indemnities aren't going to be the same as they used to be necessarily. The vendor's going to want you to make an indemnity with respect to the information that you're putting into the platform. You're going to want an indemnity with respect to the information that's coming out of that platform. You're going to want to have some ownership, representation, or warranty, non-infringement essentially, which becomes very hard to do with a large language model, and you're utilizing an aggregate of information to create the outputs that are being utilized by your customer or the code that you've created. How do you hold their feet to account? Can they actually make that rep or warranty that it's not infringing or that they own it? They probably can't. And so the dynamic is shifting, and you've got to have an understanding of how to deal with these in creative ways, these issues that are presented by kind of this changing landscape that AI introduces into kind of just typical contract language and the typical structure that we've dealt with for the last few decades, essentially.
Okay, great points, Marcus. Thank you so much. Scott, coming over to you, 2 layers. Number 1, contract. Number 2, ways of implementing faster.
Yeah, I love what Daniel mentioned about templates and best practices, and those have come a long way in the last few years. And I'm a huge fan of the speed to value that those can offer. However, I'm hearing is particularly in the SAP world, they don't quite come out and say it, but this idea that one size fits all, no way. Kyler mentioned every SAP client has customized something. I would agree with that. And so a template only gets you started. And what's changing, I hope, is the ability to set out the flows and the business rules that are at least out of the box, templatized and best practice in a language and format that both the business and the IT professionals can understand. To get around not code, not if-thens, but rather to get around a flow, a chart, a diagram, and to be able to have that conversation about, all right, this is what came out of the box. How do we want to tweak it to work for us is what can really accelerate the implementation and the time to value now. It's the tooling that allows the line of business leaders and the IT leaders to speak the same language. And when they walk out of the room, to actually have something that's near deliverable and testable is what's going to make those templates of the greatest value when you have to go far beyond one size fits all.
Okay, amazing insights there. Thank you so much, Scott, for that. So we are going to end the segment with one more 2-part question, and that is going to be, any sort of ERP implementation trends, as well as any closing advice that you are going to have. So Daniel, 2 things, trends, closing advice.
Yeah. So what I always recommend is business to be involved in all the implementations, in all the phases, not only in user acceptance tests or the fit to template sessions. It's always, or fit to standard. It's all the way. Any implementation should be business driven, and IT will support to that in order to get a successful implementation. Also, very important to focus on the training, all change management that in some deployments are fully forget, and it's really important to be sure that we are covering the business requirements, the users are properly trained, and the change management is assessed in order to get a successful deployment for any ERP solution.
Okay, great points. Thank you so much, Daniel, for that. So Kyler, over to you. 2 things. Number 1, any sort of trends that you are observing, as well as closing advice.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are great points, Daniel. I definitely think IT and the business, that's a huge trend that we've seen over the last couple of years, is those kind of move into that, and the evolution of the CIO role, right, as really becoming more of a business leader than a technical leader. And I think, one of the trends that we've kind of covered today is how fast can you do this? How quick can you do this? And we've talked about it already, but the question really in that statement is you. you, the client. What are you trying to achieve, and what are you trying to, get as far as business? And a lot of times, what I think is a great innovation, but it's also a little bit scary for us that have seen implementations go really wrong, is seeing the birth of these microservices or more of these modular-based open source ERP options, because they are flexible, they are more affordable, they're not just focused on kind of like this one big bang approach. They're able to be more phased in the budget, and they're easier to get kind of approval for. The thing you want to really look at this trend is, yes, this is a shift in the marketplace, and it makes it a bit more competitive, which I think is super healthy. The thing that we want to do first is make sure that you understand what you're getting into. You don't know what you don't know. A lot of people, I think probably, the top SAP consultant I know has done 30 implementations, and that's crazy, right? So you don't do this every single day. So reach out to someone who's in the technology agnostic world, who's able to kind of be your coach through this process, that's dedicated and contractually, for Marcus's point, to making sure that you are achieving the goals that you want to achieve. So then you're able to really sit down and say, okay, this is what I have, and this is what I want to achieve on that front. I think my advice for success is very much the same, is go into this with full eyes open as an executive leadership team. This is truly a transformation of your entire business. It is not an IT project. It takes the people, strategies around them. It takes strategies around the processes, right? You can't throw technology over broken processes. And then it takes the technology, which honestly is a very third afterthought for those to get ready to have a successful implementation. So making sure that you understand the just breadth of this project, even if you're going to take a more agile approach, mini waterfall approach, whatever you want to call it, right? You understand what you're getting into. And that's the piece that phase zero planning becomes so critical to understanding where you're going on your enterprise roadmap.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great points, Kyler. So Marcus, over to you. Any sort of trends from the ERP implementation perspective and closing advice?
Yeah, I mean, just generally, I think, you can't adopt technology for the sake of adopting technology. To Kyler's point, I mean, this is a business transformation, and it's about the people. From my perspective, you have to take what any vendor says with a grain of salt, and they're going to promise you, that it's going to be a fast and easy process that's going to, meet your business needs. It's going to be out of the box, off the shelf. We're using modular technology, artificial intelligence, agile, whatever it is. They're minimizing the complexity of this, and you have to understand that. The other thing that I think is becoming to the forefront really is understanding the value that your data has to these companies and protecting your data. Someone said it a little while ago. I mean, you don't want your company data, your enterprise data, within the bounds of one particular software solution and that vendor charging you to access your own data to talk to other AI systems. That's just not going to work, and that is a trend that we are starting to see. And then finally, what I always say in these types of situations is, you've got to review that contract. You've got to understand the risks that you're getting into, mitigate those risks, have someone experienced look at these contracts. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lawyer. A contracts person can do the job, but somebody has to look at this. These contracts are changing. The risk profile is changing. The technology is changing. You can't walk into this with the expectation that you're going to spend $30 million over a 7-year period and not look at the contract. It just doesn't make sense. That's a professional malpractice in my view.
Yeah, could not agree more. Great points, Marcus. Scott, over to you. Any sort of trends and closing advice, please?
Yeah, I think the biggest trend that I see is that ERP is becoming more modular, more granular in nature, and that this idea of a composable ERP, even a composable enterprise, is what's happening. As Kyler said, line of business leaders are really getting a seat at the IT table, and they're starting to talk that same language. And so what that brings about is, and maybe here's my controversial statement: your ERP implementation will never end.
Yep.
You will constantly be implementing something new, right? At the core of it, it's like the big trunk of a huge tree, right? Is your core ERP, your system of record, your main transaction system. And that stays pretty stable, right? Debits are debits and credits are credits and invoices and orders and whatever. That stays pretty stable. What happens in change is out on the branches and leaves of the tree. And those are the kinds of things where the line of business, the business is going to say, this has to change, this has to change, that has to change. And so you'll constantly be implementing new capabilities in your, what I'll call the broader ERP ecosystem. And our advice there is, listen to the business, stay agile, don't lock yourself in from a commercial perspective to future changes that might happen. And I'll just end with this from the SAP perspective. I mean, we're helping our clients continue to get value out of their current SAP systems well past the end of maintenance deadlines that SAP has mandated because it's too soon. The thing's still working. It's highly customized. We don't need to change it. That core, that trunk of the tree doesn't need to change. We have to do things in and around it. So don't spend so much time, making a new tree. Rather, let's focus on things we can do in and around it. And that's our advice: is keep your options open and decide your what and your why before you commit to a who and a when, if that helps.
It does help. Thank you so much, Scott, for that. And I'll end with my own thoughts and comments and the way we started in the beginning. To be completely honest, when we look at the traditional implementation versus the next-gen implementation, if you really think about it, on-prem versus cloud, in cloud, I think the control is going to go back to the vendors, and that's where the real problem is. The implementations are going to be 10 times harder. The more composable, the more fragmented you are going to make your data silos, as well as the architecture, the implementation complexity is probably going to be 10 times more. So yes, you are going to have tools. Yes, you are going to have technology, but you are increasing the effort with these implementations when you are going to increase the complexity of those technologies. So my advice to you is going to be whatever Marcus said, okay? Listen to third-party vendors, what they are saying, pay attention to the contract, pay attention to data access, who holds the data, and what is going to be the overarching architecture, I guess, once you are going to build your target operating model. On that note, Jonathan, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sam, and the rest of our panel. It's been great to listen in on the discussion for the last hour. As we wrap things up here, I'd love to invite each of you a bit of time for self-promotion, whether you'd like to plug your LinkedIn profile, company solution, an upcoming book release, whatever it is. We'll go in reverse clockwise. So we'll start with Scott. And let's try to keep things under 30 seconds if we can.
All right, great. My encouragement: extend the life and value of your existing systems and then optimize and innovate around them sooner than waiting for the vendor. If you want to follow something that I've been working on lately, it's a podcast called Streetwise Live SAP. You can find that at riministreet.com/SAP Live.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate you having given us your time today. Marcus, over to you.
Yeah, my parting advice here really is, I think, look at these contracts. We're happy to do that for you. There's an old saying in my business: early legal advice is not expensive. And I think reviewing, negotiating these contracts is a better option than having your implementation go sideways, pulling your contract out of a drawer 7 years later, not realizing that it doesn't do anything for you, and then winding up in litigation that's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's not a good path forward, and I think we can keep you out of trouble. And if you're in trouble, we can do that too by litigating against software vendors and representing you if you've been damaged by an ERP vendor. You can check out my YouTube channel, Marcus Stephen Harris, technology lawyer. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Marcus Harris.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time today. Kyler, how about you?
Yeah, so at the Confluential, we're really about kind of taking back the ownership of your implementation, what that really looks like for you, taking that kind of vendor machine that we've been utilizing for the last couple of years and really talking about that. So the first thing you can do to really make sure that you have that power to make those decisions is really follow everyone on this live on LinkedIn and really join the ongoing digital communication around what is an implementation, whether you're doing warehouse management implementation, a CRM implementation. It doesn't matter. When you're in that environment, you have a lot of independent voices, specifically on LinkedIn or even Insight Jam is a great place to kind of go and ask questions. So that's kind of what I'll leave you with, to follow all of us on LinkedIn. You can look at our @names. You can also check out theconfluential.com if you want more information on us.
Excellent. Well said. Thank you for that. Daniel.
Sure, thank you so much for inviting me. It was a real pleasure. And yeah, if you are looking for an SAP implementation in cloud or on-premise and looking to get all the business engagements and be sure that the trainings are properly done, don't hesitate in reaching out to me. I'm very active in LinkedIn, mainly for SAP postings, but also for other ERP trends, mainly for artificial intelligence. So I would be glad to support anyone. Thank you.
Excellent. Appreciate that. And last but not least, our moderator, Sam.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, guys, for all the insights. And again, Elevate IQ is in the business of providing diagnostic advice. We publish a lot of resources just to help with the process, whether you are starting your journey or you are in the middle of journey, which has derailed. And one of the resources that we have is the digital transformation report, in which you are going to find a lot of these insights. And you can download that on our site. You can find me, Sam Gupta, WBS Rocks, or Elevate IQ, ELEVAT IQ on Google, or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sam. Appreciate your time again today. That will do it for our panel. And thank you again for your attention, for watching for the last hour. If you'd like to dive deeper into this topic or learn more about ERP, we encourage you, of course, to visit our always on tech community, insightjam.com, a great destination for all your technology needs and research. Or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel for panel highlights, weekly podcasts, and expert advice, and so much more. We're going to be back in just a few short minutes with Sam Gupta, in fact, for our next expert keynote. He'll be talking about trends affecting digital transformation. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned right here to the networks of Insight Jam and Solutions Review. Thanks again for watching. My name is Jonathan. We'll see you next time. For video highlights, replays, and more, visit insightjam.com.